Okay, we're about to dive into a pretty radical idea, one that could totally reshape education as we know it. And believe it or not, it all starts at beauty school. So, this whole explainer is based on some incredible research from Tran University. And what they're proposing is a huge shift in how we value certain jobs, moving away from just looking at the dollars and cents and toward a model that's all about human connection. At the very heart of it all is this one simple question, but it's a big one that challenges a system we all just kind of take for granted. What if the person carefully sculpting your nails wasn't just seen as a technician, but as a genuine artist? To really get why their solution is so brilliant, we first have to understand the problem. And it all comes down to this well-meaning but really flawed government rule that puts a simple spreadsheet in direct conflict with the reality of how a salon actually works. And the villain in this story, if you want to call it that, is the Gainful Employment rule. Now, on the surface, it sounds like a great idea, right? It's a rule designed to protect students by making sure they can actually afford to pay back their loans. But in practice, well, it creates a massive problem. And here's where it all falls apart. The government's rule only looks at official W-2 income. That's it. It totally ignores the real-world economics of the beauty industry, where a huge chunk of a professional's income comes from commissions and, maybe most importantly, cash tips. You've got this entire invisible economy that the spreadsheet just can't see. Which leads to this completely absurd situation. You have a system that was meant to protect students, but it ends up punishing schools whose graduates are actually doing great. A graduate could be making a fantastic living, totally debt-free, but because their reported income looks low, the school fails the government's test. It's wild. So how do you get out of a trap like that? Well, you don't try to argue with the math. You change the game completely. The big idea is this. Let's just reframe the whole thing. Let's move beauty education out of that vocational box, which has all those strict employment rules, and into the world of fine arts, where, value is measured in a very different way. And you gotta understand, this is not just playing with words. It's an incredibly smart strategic move. It taps into something called the liberal arts exemption, a rule that's already on the books for programs like painting or sculpture. So by reclassifying, these schools can ditch those flawed metrics, they can tap into new arts funding, and, just as important, they can give these professionals the dignity and recognition of being called what they are, artists. But wait a minute, is it really art? Well, the researchers lay out this powerful case for what they call somatic art, which is just a fancy way of saying art that happens on the human body. Let's take a look at the evidence. We think of nail art as this modern trend, but it has this incredibly deep history. We're talking 5,000 years. From ancient India to the Incas and all the way through the Renaissance, adorning the body has always been a powerful art form, right up there with anything you'd see in a museum. And if you look at the actual skills involved, it gets even more impressive. A modern nail artist is basically a microsculptor. They're working with the chemistry of polymerization, just like a sculptor uses resin. They're using principles of structural engineering to build a strong nail, and they're applying complex color theory on a tiny, moving, living canvas. Okay, so reclassifying the field as art, that's step one, but this new blueprint goes way further. It completely overhauls the financial and even the emotional side of the school with a model they call Forever Green. First, you have to look at how things are now. The typical tuition in this industry is just staggering, $20,000. And that cost usually forces students into some really high-interest, sometimes predatory loans before they've even made their first buck. Okay, now compare that to the Forever Green model they're testing out. The tuition is slashed to around $4,000. So how on earth is that possible? It's actually a pretty simple but radical choice. They just refuse to process federal student loans. That gets rid of a ton of administrative costs, and they pass those savings right on to the student. And that's the real magic right there. With zero federal debt, the whole government debt-to-earnings thing, it just becomes irrelevant. The graduate is completely free from the very system that was set up to trap them in the first place. This table just lays it all out so perfectly. It's a complete shift in thinking. You're moving from a world where the only goal is getting a license to a world where the goal is about human connection. You're going from seeing students as just future taxpayers to seeing them as artists, healers, and leaders in their communities. But believe it or not, the impact goes even deeper than just art and money. This model completely redefines what a beauty professional does in society. It turns the salon share into this really important place for community care. This is done through programs like the Safe Chair Initiative, where professionals get trained to be what they call community health sentinels. Think about it. The relationship between a client and their beauty pro is incredibly intimate and built on trust. That means they are often the very first people to see the signs of something like domestic abuse. This training gives them the tools to recognize what's happening, respect boundaries, and refer clients to help, making them a crucial first line of defense. Okay, so this all sounds amazing in theory, right? But how does a school actually pull this off? Well, there's a practical roadmap for that, too. The path forward is a really clear legal transformation. A school starts by becoming a nonprofit and getting tax-exempt status. Then comes the really big step. They go for accreditation from the National Association of Schools of Art and Design. Once that happens, the school is legally a real-deal arts institution, and it has officially escaped that old, broken system. And when you boil it all down, this whole thing is really about a psychological shift. It's designed to take a student from that hopeful, maybe a little uncertain feeling of, yes, I can, to the powerful, confident feeling of looking back and saying, yes, I did. It's about empowerment right from the very beginning. And that's why this is so much bigger than just the beauty industry. It's a blueprint for change that leaves us with this huge question. If we can totally re-engineer an industry by focusing on art, community, and human dignity instead of just spreadsheets, what other broken systems are out there, just waiting for their own forever green revolution?